Welcome to this seminar on developing younger female leaders. So I'm excited about this. This is something I genuinely really love doing, and so it's something that I feel passionate about this subject, and we're going to be hearing as well in a little bit from Ella and from Elle. So we're going to be hearing from some younger female leaders as to what it's been like for them in their journey, and what they maybe have found helpful, and to kind of instruct us as well. So it's not just theory that's going to be talked about, we're going to hear it in practice. So I've got just a few principles to kind of lay down before we then go into more of a conversation. So, developing younger female leaders. Number one, start as young as possible. Give children roles and responsibilities in church life. Teach girls to know and expect God's call on their life as early as possible. So to use that kind of language is really important. If you've got daughters, or if you're investing into girls, I read with my two girls a series of books that all started with the title 10 Girls Who Changed the World. Yeah. 10 girls who made a difference. 10 girls who made history. So there's actually some great resources out there to kind of start early, start young, because it's the possibility thinking that is actually really important in the earliest stages as to God uses women significantly. And also for girls and for teens, expose them to female leaders. That's really important as well. And then I think this is a good principle in many areas of life and leadership, but particularly for girls. When you get a sense of God's call, write it down and tell someone who believes in you. Yeah. So important. So if you are hearing girls or teenagers talk about, I think maybe God is saying this to me, or I've had a prophetic word, or they just begin to articulate. Often they will articulate it with a little bit of there can be a bit of faltering, they can be a little bit hesitant, but as soon as you hear anything that is in any way communicating something where a girl or a teenager is feeling like, God's hand is on my life, and there's a call of God, then absolutely get them to write it down and just affirm that in them. I can remember for me, it was when I was 15, and I had gone on a kind of a youth camp, and I'd gone for a little walk by myself, and I felt God give me the verse 2 Timothy 4 verse 5. I didn't know what it was, so I went back to my room, got my Bible out and read it, and it was, "But you keep your head in all circumstances, endure hardship, do the work of an evangelist, and fulfill all the duties of your ministry." For me, it was that kind of like moment of like, God's called me, his hand is on my life. I thought it was going to be a missionary, and obviously then turned to church leadership. This is important to recognise as well. The pre-teen years are particularly important. Research shows that girls' confidence often peaks at 9 and then fades as puberty and hormones and often culture hit, often only to return in their 40s and 50s to get back to the same. Now, that doesn't have to be the case. That does not have to be the case. I'm not speaking that over us. But there is something about, you can often see it, actually. You can see kind of there's a confidence in girls in kind of like, 8, 9, 10, and then often that it will just withdraw and fade a little bit in the teenage years, and we've got to do everything we can to be able to bring that back to the fore. And so when you see leadership, particularly in a girl or a young teen, just speak it out. Let the concept and the idea of leadership form her narrative and her self-perception. So one small thing that we do here is fairly regularly we have youth takeovers. So on a Sunday morning, all the roles are filled by youth, and that's just brilliant, because then, we've seen a number of teenage girls who are hosting meetings or doing a little talk or, in the worship band. And then just recently we've moved to the next step of a monthly kind of youth church. So just in this year, 2025, we've had both a 15-year-old and a 17-year-old girl preaching to her peer, her youth group, which is brilliant. So start young. Number 2, know that the leadership gift can look different to the leadership gift in a young man. It's not always the case, and this is a generalisation, and I really do understand that there are as many different ways that leadership outworks itself as there are personalities and backgrounds. I know it comes in different shapes and sizes and forms, but there are some generalizations. The leadership gift in a young woman can be more hidden than that of a young man. Potentially they might make less noise about it, they might draw less attention to it, but the key is to look for the fruit of it. So the kind of questions looking at young girls or teenagers: who can gather? Who can make suggestions and others go along with it? Who's been given responsibility at school? That's a good sign. I actually had a proud mummy moment. Both my girls were made head girl in year 6 of their primary school. And for me, there was just something of kind of like, school have seen, that's in them. And who's bringing friends along? That's another kind of like, there's obviously something of influence in a girl or a teenager if they're bringing their friends along to kids stuff or to youth. But often younger female leaders need more encouragement, they need more permission, and they need you to draw it out of them more. So actually ask for their input, ask for their opinions, give them the opportunities. Number 3, developing younger female leaders, help them to do the work around the theology of women in leadership. So get them to read the books, do the study, provide an opportunity to see the different kind of theologies that are out there, but obviously give them a really robust biblical theology presenting, what is a strong case for women in leadership. And encourage them to wrestle it through for themselves so that with integrity they know what they believe and why they believe it. And also to know the key points off by heart, so that if questioned and someone comes, against them, perhaps stepping out in leadership, particularly if it's in their first season of stepping into a leadership role, if they've learned just a few key points off by heart, it means they won't feel so kind of on the back foot or unprepared or even defensive. It's really important to help younger women handle themselves well in theological conversations. And obviously the goal of a good conversation is not always that you will agree at the end of it, but it is that you will understand each other more. And so that, I think that's just actually being realistic for young women. They will sometimes end up in conversations where someone disagrees with them. That's okay. But what's really good is that we understand each other more. So for me, if you like, that kind of almost like an elevator pitch, like if someone, doesn't agree or says, why? How on earth can you believe that women can be in leadership? I've just got kind of like 3 points in my head. If it's like a few minutes I have with someone. The first is, what you really believe is what you do. So people will often bring the examples of where Paul is correcting situations that have gone wrong. But you look at Romans 16, where he lists all the female co-workers, including Priscilla, who's a teacher, Phoebe, who's a deacon, Junia, who's an apostle, and then you've got a whole load of other women who are listed as well. What you really believe is what you do. And so you see Paul is commending these women. And then the second thing is teaching texts take precedence over corrective texts. So there were corrections to things that were going quite badly wrong in a couple of situations, particularly in Ephesus and Corinth. And Paul is rightly bringing some correction where spiritual authority was going wrong. But my conviction is that they are corrective texts that were to specific people, specific times, specific locations, and that there are teaching texts which are for all people, all times, all situations, which, for example, would be when Paul is talking about the body of Christ and how we've all got a part to play, and lists all the spiritual gifts, including leadership, including teaching, and at no point in his giving the list of the spiritual gifts, he said, but by the way, X, Y, and Z, that's only for men, or X, Y, and Z, that's only for women. Yeah. It's like, this is for the body, to bless and serve the body. And then the third thing I will say is ultimately leadership is about servanthood and laying your life down. So, I remember Elaine Storkey many, many years ago saying the issue is not about women gaining equal rights. It's about women gaining equal rights to serve. It's brilliant. So that you need to kind of help women wrestle it through themselves and then be able to articulate it, again, non-defensively. But just like, this, I've studied this, I've read the stuff, I've prayed it through, and this is my biblical conviction. But just to help women to stay calm, because often if it's the first time you're hitting some opposition, humanly, the emotions, can get riled, but we want to help women to handle themselves well. The reality is, if in a conversation like that, a young woman can stay calm and kind and demonstrate emotional and spiritual authority, actually that speaks volumes. I can remember a couple of interactions early on with someone who was from a stream that didn't believe in women in leadership, and we had just one or two conversations, and then on a car journey, he just suddenly said, "You've changed my mind about women in leadership." And I was like, "Wow, like how?" And it was like, it's how you've handled yourself that has done that. So there are times where a young woman knows that she's been gifted by God in leadership, but for whatever reason ends up in a setting where people or maybe the system doesn't create room and space for that. And I've had a number of women over the years, some who've left here and ended up in churches where, in a sense, they've not read the small print, and they've thought, because it's looked and felt like Open Heaven Church and like Pioneer, and then, oh my gosh, they've suddenly realised they're not actually allowed to, whatever it might be, preach, teach, lead, and if they're feeling that sense of like, I'm just not going to be able to express all that God has put in me, then I would say to those young women, that's probably not the place to stay and flourish. But don't leave in offence. Guard your inner world. That's the most important thing, is keep your heart soft. We really don't want bitter or easily offended women. That doesn't do the cause of women in leadership any good. So help women to leave well, to forgive, to operate in grace. And obviously that's very countercultural at the moment, where often someone's power lies in how many layers of victimhood they can have. I just don't play those cards. Just don't do that. Number 4, communicate the privilege and fulfilment of leadership. There's a lot, out there which is around the cost of leadership, there is a reality, there is a cost of leadership. But ultimately, when you're called by God to serve his people in leadership, it is the most rewarding thing you can do. And so, as older female leaders, communicate that often. Talk about just the fact it is, yes, it's hard work, and yes, there's a cost, but it's fun. It's, it's fulfilling. It's like, wow, I get to be able to be the privilege of sort of kind of co-working with God as people's lives are getting transformed, as people are getting saved, as people are getting set free, as people are finding their destinies. I mean, man alive. I think it's the best thing ever. And so do communicate that. One thing I've noticed with the younger generation, there can be more of an aspiration to be a Christian influencer than a Christian leader. A Christian influencer is not in Scripture. So, there's actually something about stepping up to carry leadership roles. Number 5, the internal battles of a younger female leader can be different to men. I think some of the battles in men can be perhaps around a desire to be noticed, recognised, to be somebody, whereas the difference perhaps in women are more happier to be hidden, not always wanting to stand out, finding it harder to find their voice and assert their voice or influence. There's often more self-doubt that is going on in women's minds. Who am I to do this? Who do I think I am? I can't really do this. Others will see through me. I don't think I've got what it takes. All that stuff, the head noise. We just need to help, women replace the head noise with God's truth. Research shows that women often underestimate their abilities and men often overestimate their abilities. I talked about this with someone yesterday. There's a bit of research, I think Harvard have done it. Men will apply for a job when they meet only 60% of the required qualifications, whereas women will only apply if they meet most of the criteria. There is something going on here. So we need to hear God's voice about what he thinks about us and let that shape what we think we know about ourselves. And the best thought replacement strategy is to replace every negative thought with 3 positive ones that you speak out loud. Because we know there's power in our voice. There's power in confession. So many times, I can remember first starting out, and probably the hardest setting for me, because Pioneer was great, it was like a wide open field, but the town-wide setting was a hard one to go into. All men, I was the only woman, and I can remember I would walk to the ministers' fellowships meeting, literally speaking out loud over myself. I am called to do this. God has given me what I need to counteract the head noise that was going on as I was walking to those meetings, and then would often have to talk over myself on the way back again. There's also the thing around expectations of how life will turn out. One thing that I often say to young women, don't put yourself on hold until you get married, because perhaps you might not get married. Right? That's okay. And marriage does not complete us. Marriage is a gift. Christ completes us. And fulfilling our calling in Christ is what deeply completes us. So, I've just seen that too often. It's been a bit of a pattern, just don't do that. And in fact, gaining some leadership experience before someone gets married, if indeed they do happen to get married, is very helpful. Because then you know that your leadership gift is something that God has given you in your own right, and it's not simply as an extension of your husband's gift or role. And actually, I think you see, where there are ministries that are co-leading in ministry together, it's something very glorious when you see both the husband and the wife, very secure, very content, operating in their own God-given gift. Someone once asked me, where are all the women in their 30s? And I realised that from a cohort of when I was in my early 20s of men and women who were gifted, young men and women who were called by God, actually very few women were still in ministry. Those who were, number one, had a good amount of leadership experience and growth in confidence before having children. And number two, they had husbands who intentionally were prepared to absorb some of the cost to release their wives into ministry. So that's a really interesting one of you do need, I often say if there's a young woman and she's gifted in leadership and she's thinking, maybe engaged or whatever, whatever, I'll just say it's just worth making sure your husband is really on board, with recognising the leadership gift in you. I can remember me and Rich, we wrote our own wedding vows, and a line in his wedding vow was, and I promise to release Ness into everything that God has called her to be, which was a wonderful thing to hear on my wedding day. I'm like, this is a good man. So I will often say, to women who think about getting married, make sure you marry someone who's deeply secure in who they are in God, because that will actually allow them to really release you into all that God has called you to be. And then number 6, a menu of development and the importance of feedback. So as an older female leader, think about the tasks, the projects, the events that you can give away that will suitably stretch the confidence, competence and capacity of the younger female leaders that you're developing. Match the tasks to the primary spiritual gifts of those leaders so that you strengthen their strengths and you help them engage in ministry that brings them fully alive. So help them to know what their top 3 spiritual gifts are. And then cultural feedback. That's really important. And then I would say to younger women, say yes to the opportunities that are given to you, and the sooner the better. Amen. There's a quote here by someone called Virginia Rometty, who was the first woman to lead IBM. She said, I learned to take on things I'd never done before. Growth and comfort do not coexist. There is something about a growth mindset that means that even though it's going to be uncomfortable, you step out of the comfort zone and into the growth zone and say yes to things. So the younger that a woman will do her first preach, the younger she is when she first leads someone to Christ, the younger that a woman church plants, I think the better. It means fears don't have time to build up and become barriers. So I'm going to ask Ella and Els to come up here and ask them a few questions, and then we'll open it up for questions to the 3 of us. Yeah, both together.
She wants to sit down.
Oh, sit down. Yeah, that's fine.
I'll just stand awkwardly.
Yeah.
Sitting down.
I'll bring a chair as well then. Do it first now. Except I need my notes.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. So, first question, Els, to you. How did you know, or when did you first realise you had a gift of leadership? Was it a sense in you? Did someone speak it over you, or was there a specific moment?
I think for me, my dad was actually the first person to be like, you're a leader. And I literally used to ick so hard when he said that to me. I used to be like, oh my gosh, no, I'm not. I think just because I believed a lie from a very early age that maybe what I felt like was leading was actually pushing myself forward. And it felt too bold, almost felt overconfident, and I was worried about what people would think of me. But I do remember in school, like in group projects and stuff, like kind of always being the one to rally people and get people together and be like, okay, why don't we go this way? Almost like I recognise now that there was a vision that I had in my head of where I knew I wanted the project to go, for example. So, but I think it probably took me till about 4 or 5 years ago to actually say I'm a leader, I think. So quite a long time. But my dad used to say it from when I was about 3 or 4. I used to go up to kids in the playground and be like, do you want to play with me? Like, I've got this game going. And I used to get like group games going. It was really fun. So I can see now that I probably did have a sense, but I wouldn't have called myself a leader until I was about 20.
It's worth saying, actually, Els, just introduce yourself and what your leadership roles.
That's a good place to start. So I'm Els, I'm the student worker at Open Heaven, and I've been doing that for about 3 years now, coming up to 3 years. So yeah.
And OH1 leadership team.
Oh, and I'm on the OH1 leadership team. So OH1 is our 18s to 30s expression of Open Heaven. Yeah. Any more that you want me to say?
So, Ella, introduce yourself
I will.
and then tell us your journey of recognising the leadership call and gift in your life.
Cool. So I'm Ella. I'm a part of Blessed Community Church in West London, and I have actually led longer term more outside of church. So I actually work full time for a drug and alcohol charity. I'm a team leader, so I lead a team of 15 people, and then all the church stuff is on the side, my second job. I've been leading, I guess, in the wider leadership of the church for a while. I led the worship ministry for 2.5 years, but it was only in January this year that I officially joined the leadership team of our church. That's me. And then I guess probably some similarities to your journey. I was talking to my mum on the way up, and we were talking about the questions, and I said the first question to her, and she just laughed and said, "From the day you were born." And I mean, with Linda Ward as your mum, I mean, you kind of don't really have an option. So yeah, I guess similarly to you, all throughout kind of school and then uni, I very naturally kind of took on leadership roles, but I also really didn't like it and didn't want to, and really shied away from it. So people always spoke over me, you're a leader, from a very, very young age. And I think the journey was for me to accept that, and to celebrate that, and to learn what that looks like for me, particularly with, having had mum as such a strong female leader in the network, being a pioneer baby, do you know what I mean? Coming along to everything. It was in my blood, but I think there was definitely kind of a repelling in me because of that, wanting to kind of do something different, find my own journey. And so I think that probably led me to more naturally taking on leadership positions outside of the church, because that was kind of my more unique calling. And then I also had to go on a real journey, probably in kind of, the last 5, 6, 7 years of, accepting it really. And I did a discipleship training school with YWAM, Youth with a Mission. I was over in Australia, and I actually did that after university, so I was 21, and the whole 6 months were basically just like a whole 6-month head to heart journey, like when something really goes from your head to your heart. And it was like everything that I had kind of learned about God and scripture and myself throughout the whole 21st years of my life, in those 6 months actually went into my heart. And I remember key people speaking over me, you are a leader, and actually me discovering that I think it had to be in a different context to where my family were. So when I went to university, I actually ended up in a church that didn't believe in women in leadership. So that was a real journey. So I really resonate with some of the stuff that you were sharing there, coming up against kind of people who maybe don't kind of share those same values, and I had to really, really grapple with it. And having grown up in Pioneer my whole life, I didn't even think that people had that belief. So I was so shocked. And I remember calling mum, and I said, I'd settled in this church, it's amazing. And she went, and then kind of proceeded to tell me, and I was like, what, really? People don't believe in women in leadership? So that was really eye-opening for me, and I really had to kind of grapple with the theology, why do I actually believe that? And I think that was really formative for me. So having the opportunity to discover what it meant for me to be a leader away from my mum and my dad, away from my home church, which is very ironic because now I'm on the leadership team of my own church. But it's beautiful how God kind of takes you on that journey. So it's been a long road, and I think I'm still on that journey. My husband is a big leader as well, and so we've had that real journey of, I think for me, finding my own voice, finding my own feet, not as Linda's daughter or Jacob's wife, but actually just as Ella. Still on that journey now.
Okay, so what have been some of the main ways that you've grown and developed in your gift of leadership? So what opportunities have grown or stretched you? Else?
I think for me it's been a real progression through different roles. I think I started off, when I first joined the Open staff team, I was an intern. I was doing student work internship, and I was also doing a OH1 gathering coordinator, so I would do all the administration, I would do all the rotas. And quite naturally, I found throughout that year it was way more comfortable for me to lead than lead from the front than lead from behind the scenes. And similar to Ella, that was really hard to grapple with, because I really thought that that was so up myself to think I was good at leading up the front, which obviously isn't true. It's something that God has put in me, and it's a real strength. And so I think, similar to what Ness was saying, all the things that have grown me and stretched me have been things that have absolutely terrified me, and things that have made me worry to the pit of my stomach. But I think opportunities to really refine and practice and get to know my strengths as a leader have just been unmissable. Like, I'm so glad that there's been some things that I've done that have challenged me and stretched me. I'm trying to think of some examples. So when I first became the student worker, Luke, who used to do the job before me, he's now my line manager, he used to still come with me to student nights and help me run them. And a lot of the time, because he's kind of been almost like my safety blanket a little bit, he's really like trained me up and released me. But he was like, okay, Els, from the get-go, like, you're leading this through, like, you're doing all of this. And I used to sit there and cry, genuinely. I'm a crier. Any girls out there, you know. But I used to sit there and cry and be like, no, I can't. And he and Ness and other like key leaders in our church have just been so vocal and really, really affirming of things that they've seen in me, even before I've seen them in myself. And so I think all those times where I've kind of almost like been thrown in the deep end a little bit, they have been so formative, and I'm genuinely really grateful that I get to sit here now and share that with you, because at the time I would have peed my pants. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else specific that's helped me to grow. Ella, you go, and I might come back. Yeah.
What was the question?
The question is, what have been some of the main ways that you have grown, developed? What opportunities have stretched you? And
I would say similarly to Els, I can kind of remember moments where people took a risk, took a punt, and they were like, you can do this. Even from a very young age, both in and out of church. And I think there are key people that stick out in my mind that really believed in me, men and women, but particularly even outside of church. So like different managers that I've had who, they didn't even have faith, but they saw the gift of leadership over me. There's one person in particular who just played a massive part in that journey for me, and really believed in me and really gave me opportunities and pushed me forward. And she was the reason I ended up kind of becoming a team leader and kind of moving up in work. So I think I can think of key people who like really believed in me and were happy to, I guess, release things to me, and we can often like plug gaps, can't we? And we'll probably get onto this a little bit later, but for those leaders who could have done things themselves but actually decided to step back to let me step up and have a go, was massive. And I guess a few examples. One that came to mind was when I was doing my DTS with YWAM. I went on to outreach in India and Papua New Guinea. And when we were in Papua New Guinea, I mean, I don't know if anyone's familiar with YWAM. It's like very radical. Like you're really like you're on your feet for like 12, 13 hours a day, and all you've got is your Bible. Like you've got no internet, you've got no Google, none of these fancy Bible apps. And I was very early on, kind of, I guess, in my journey of preaching and that sort of thing, and one of our outreach team leaders said, do you want to preach today? And I was like, okay. We're in the middle of this kind of like village, with no electricity, no running water. All I had was my notebook and my Bible. And I was like, okay. And it was amazing. And, God really moved. And I really had to rely on the Holy Spirit. It was like not me at all, because I didn't have Google. But you know what I mean? Like I didn't have any of these amazing resources at my fingertips. It was me and God. And I'm so glad that, they decided to be like, come on, give it a go. And it hasn't always gone well. I can think of times where I've led worship or preached and it's like been so embarrassing, or like even recently I accidentally called Jacob Jesus in front of everyone at church. I was like, oh gosh, that makes my theology look so weird. And actually, I think there is something in modelling, like not being perfect. I really try to still do that, and really value when other people have done that, when other women have led just like authentically and not kind of all put together. And then there was another time. I think I've learned a lot in the workplace as well, and I'm really passionate about. I feel that real call of dual leadership in the workplace and also in the church. And I don't really ever see myself completely being in the church, but actually always having kind of a foot in both camps, and feel like there's a real richness in the experience that you can kind of share into both. And so I've learned a huge amount through leading people in the workplace. There was one example that really comes to mind of one girl that I was leading who we'd recruited. She did an amazing interview, and then started work, and it just all went downhill. She wasn't doing her job properly. She wasn't turning up to work. Like week after week after week, it was like dog ate my homework. I was like, I'd wake up on a Monday morning and be like, what's it going to be this week? And it got so bad that we had to get HR involved, and I had to call her to a probationary review meeting. And as I did that, she handed her notice in and put loads of false allegations in against me on her way out, and left the organisation. And then I had to go through a whole investigation process. And I mean, I must have been like 22 at the time, leading a team of people who were all older than me. This is one of those pinch me moments of like, God, why am I here? And it was horrendous at the time. But actually now I look back and I think there was so much gold that came from that time. And I really learned by like just doing things and having to rely on God and the Holy Spirit in that space. So yeah, I think it's people who have kind of taken a punt on me, and then just doing things that have kind of and then also actually like training and that sort of thing. Obviously I shared about pathways this morning, but genuinely that played a massive part as well, because I think having grown up in the church, there's this expectation that your Bible really well, that you've got kind of all of the tools to be a good leader. And actually I think sometimes there was shame maybe around me not knowing certain aspects of theology or the Bible or that sort of thing. And my husband did a theology degree and I never did that. So going away and doing a discipleship training school with YWAM and going away and doing pathways was really releasing for me to actually kind of be like, no, actually I want to go deeper and I want to learn these things for myself, not having just kind of heard them secondhand growing up. And those have been really formative for me as well.
That's brilliant. Gosh, that's I think something else that has been really helpful for me is any leaders around me who are just speaking out, just like one bar wisdom lines, basically. Like Ness will sometimes say to me, like, Els, calling is bigger than how you feel. It runs deeper than how you feel. So, put your feelings to one side for now, walk in your calling. And there's also lines, gifting gets you in the room, character keeps you in the room. Like, what are you doing to invest in your character? There's things like that have been spoken over me that are so rooted in scripture that they're just unfailing. Like, obviously scripture's unfailing, so they just can't be wrong. So those things have helped as well. And just I think people who have identified something really specific in me, I've always been very, very compassionate. I'm very empathetic. And I had no idea that was a spiritual gift. I didn't know about mercy. But I remember some people teaching me about it and being like, this is the way to walk in it maturely. This is the way to walk in it very immaturely. So there have been some things that I've had to learn in terms of walking in my gifts really well. But all the teaching and the input on that and all the encouragement to walk in my calling and in my gifts has been incredibly helpful. So I'd add that.
Great. Brilliant. So what have been some of the main challenges you faced in growing as a younger female leader?
I've actually got a few notes. There's many. Well, I've kind of already touched on the main challenge that comes to mind is like finding my own voice, like finding my own kind of path and journey of being a leader, not as Linda's daughter or Jacob's wife, but also I think in that actually celebrating the legacy as well, and do you know what I mean, that actually like my mum is an amazing leader and so is my dad, and actually there's a real richness of carrying that. And the same for my husband Jacob. His dad was a Church of England vicar, and so when we got married we really felt God say kind of there's a huge legacy that you're taking on. And so actually that kind of finding my own voice and my own feet, but also not discounting the legacy that there is there, and I guess proudly kind of owning that and living in that. And then more recently, I would say leading amongst friends and peers, which I think can maybe be a bit of a unique challenge for younger female leaders, particularly recently having joined the leadership in January. There are friends that I have who now I am leading them, and that can be a really, really hard dynamic for me of knowing how much of myself do you know what I mean, open up. And I'm a very kind of, what you see is what you get. Like, I don't really hold back what I'm feeling, but actually there's wisdom, isn't there, in actually what you share about your own struggles. So for me, I'm very early on in that journey of working out what does that look like for me to be authentic, but also to lead in this space and be aware that there are friends, and the putting on your leader hat, taking that off, putting on your friend hat, and that can be really hard. And then also, I guess I kind of touched on it when I was talking about at work. I am always leading people that are older than me. That is, again, I think, a very unique challenge of being a younger leader, and I've always had that growing up as well. So I remember that verse in 1 Timothy really speaking to me, like, don't let anyone look down on you because you are young. And I still feel that now, to be honest. I lead a team of 15 at work, and I think maybe there's like 1 or 2 who are younger than me. Everyone else is older than me. I'm leading like some people who are in their 60s, and sometimes you're like, God, such imposter syndrome. And again, in the church, 3/4 of the church are probably older than me. So that's a really interesting challenge. And I think what's been really helpful in that is people who are older, who maybe have kind of really affirmed that leadership gifting over me and submitted in moments as well. So even people like Joe, who's a part of the church, who's known me since I was literally a baby, and there were many other people who have seen me kind of go on that journey. When I stepped into leadership in January, those key people who actually kind of affirmed over me, like, yes, we see this and it feels right and it's part of God's plan, really helps, I think, with that imposter syndrome of like, I'm leading people who are older than me. And again, I think you just have to come back to like God's unique call in your own life, don't you? That's what I keep having to come back to. I think there was one more challenge as well. Oh yeah, the only thing which again I've already touched on, which you mentioned, was navigating tricky relationships with people who don't kind of advocate for women in leadership. And there were some really painful moments when I was at university, because my very close-knit group of friends were from the church, and most of them didn't believe in women in leadership. So I had some really painful conversations, lots and lots of tears, and them saying things like, we see leadership over you and we see leadership over your mum, but we don't believe in women in leadership. And I was like, how does that make any sense? And that whole thing of actually having that conversation and not necessarily agreeing, but understanding each other. So yeah, that's not, I guess, necessarily kind of a current challenge, but something that I've previously experienced.
I think a few things. I think similar to you, Ella, in terms of finding your voice, I guess. I think my challenge particularly has been around confidence, and not having confidence and not feeling bold, not feeling equipped to share or be up the front or things like that. And so last year, actually, my word for the year was confidence. Felt God say to me in January, this is the year we're going to hit this, and we're going to hit this hard. And I remember being sat in that quiet time and being like, oh no, here we go. But just because it was scary, to have confidence felt really out there, it felt really bold. But I quickly realised it wasn't confidence in me just getting bigger on a stage. It was confidence in who God says he is and who God says I am. And that was the journey for me last year. And I look back on last year and I think, wow, I don't think I could do some of the things I'm doing this year if it weren't for the journey I went on last year. I think that's been one of them. And I think the second one, I'm going to be really candid and speak really frankly here. I'm not saying this as I'm speaking this over my generation because I believe there's healing and there's breakthrough to be had. But anxiety is real, and it's a struggle that I'm facing quite a lot at the moment every day. And it's really hard. I can't remember who it was. Someone said in a seminar at ALC, anxiety has a gospel. It will make you feel completely alone. And that's not the gospel of Jesus at all. And so for me at the moment, a challenge I'm facing every day is the numbing feeling of anxiety coming against lies that are coming into my head. trying to hit those with truth of what Jesus says about me. And there are times where I am about to go up the front with a microphone and I'm like, I can't do this right now. But just having to rely on the Holy Spirit to see me through and sustain me. And it is so true. His grace is sufficient, isn't it? Like, there have been so many situations. We just had our students' weekend away a month ago. And I was going into it feeling like the absolute pit. I was like, God, I don't know how I'm going to do this. It's a full-on weekend. Students are looking to me. I'm like the team leader, really. And throughout the whole weekend, I didn't feel anxious once, and it was like a complete surprise when I got back. I was like, oh yeah, I'm fine. But just the kindness of God to see me through in that. But I think what I wanted to tag onto that is I do believe there's real wisdom in when someone's navigating something like this to just be really careful with what responsibility they are released into. So at the moment, like, we're kind of on a journey together of discerning whether an area of responsibility is something that I'm going to be stepping into. And there came a time kind of like in February where you were kind of saying, like, should we talk to the church about this? And I initially was like, yeah, all right, like that, I think that feels okay. But then we both kind of came back to each other and we were like, oh, actually, like, no, maybe not, just because, the more public, I guess, you are with responsibility and leadership, the more you are looked to, and like the greater the need to lay down your life to serve other people, essentially. And, when I don't have that capacity at the moment, and genuinely it is just a case of going day to day and just seeing that through and trusting God to provide each day, I'm not necessarily in the right place. So I do feel like there is wisdom in obviously releasing, taking risks, letting a young leader fly, but also going on a journey together of actually let's just hold that for now. Like, we see that that's on you, but not yet. Like, let's just let you be safe and process what you need to process and heal what needs to be healed. So yeah, that. Brilliant.
And what would you want to say to older women about raising you up as a leader? Are there any shoulds or should nots or helpful or unhelpful things that you can pass on to us?
I would say we need you. We really need you. It took me back to the conference last year where there was a big focus on like the generations, and Jacob and my mum ironically did a talk on the generations and how like every generation needs the other, and I massively feel that. And I think when you're a capable woman and you're a capable leader, I think people think you don't need encouragement and you don't need feedback, and I really need it. Not to puff me up or anything, but actually to affirm that what I'm doing is okay. And I don't know about you, but sometimes you can so get into your head about things. And so one thing I would say is feedback is essential. Like, encourage, give feedback, and when I don't get that, I ask for it because I want to grow, and because that helps me again to, affirm that call over me. So yeah, I would say definitely feedback and encouragement. I would also say listening. I think there's a lot of unsolicited advice that people give you, and I would say listening is key, and maybe that's, I don't know, everyone's different, but for me, as I'm a talker, as you can tell, and I really value processing things, and so yeah, sometimes coming with solutions isn't always what's needed in the moment, but actually listening and understanding someone's journey and where they're at and helping them, kind of piece that together. So yeah, I can think of, so many different mentors that I've had over the years, and that in different seasons, they've brought really different things that I've needed. For the last 2.5 years, I've been meeting with Julie Stokes, who's a part of the Pioneer Network. That's been amazing. And we just meet on Zoom once a month, but just to have someone who I know is for me, is praying for me, is championing me, that I can be completely frank and real about the struggles of leadership or just life or whatever it is absolutely key. And like, I think we all need that, no matter how young or old we are. It's that beautiful picture, isn't it, of like, you're being mentored by someone, they're being mentored by someone, and it just carries on and carries on. So I think one-to-one kind of discipleship 100% is key. But yeah, I would say kind of feedback, encouragement, listening.
Yeah. I think I completely agree and echo all of that. I think as well, what's really helpful is like get to know us. Like, I don't think there's a one size fits all with raising up a leader. Like, we're all completely different, as we all know. God made us that way. But for example, I'm very emotional, got a high capacity for feeling and empathy and all of this stuff. And so what might work for someone who's not wired that way, it's not going to work for me. And so I guess kind of keeping an open dialogue and conversation with my mentors has been really helpful. Like, actually, when you said that to me, that wasn't necessarily the most helpful thing. Like, I would much prefer this and this. And actually asking us, like, what would be helpful for you? Like, what kind of feedback are you looking for? That's been so helpful. And like, the main example I'm thinking of is my line manager, Luke. His wife's in the room. Hey, Ray, you all right? I'm just going to talk about Luke for a sec. He's a good one. Luke is my line manager, and he's been one of the key people who have like poured so much into me and just trained me up, basically. But he doesn't have as much emotional capacity as me. But what I've really valued is actually I felt that he has really committed to learning how I think and how I perceive my own leadership journey and how I perceive, what I'm doing on the stage. Or, so that's been really valuable to me. Is actually he makes me feel really seen and known, because he's actually taken the time to understand where I'm coming from and understand kind of how I'm thinking and how I'm approaching something, even to the point where, because he doesn't quite understand all my emotion, I sometimes have to use like analogies and pictures, but that's what I can do to help him understand. Just trying to meet halfway, I guess, with mentor and mentee. I think that was what I was going to say.
Can I add one more thing? I was just thinking, also helping someone to find their unique kind of gifts and calling, and not just kind of, I think we can sometimes see like a younger leader and be like, oh, let's just put you up there because kind of that's where the gaps are, or that's what's needed, or we think like that's what you'll be good at. But actually helping them to go on the journey of discovering what is it that God has actually put inside of them. It might not be what you feel fits, if that makes sense. That might be that actually to equip them to be a leader in the workplace. It might not be in church. So I think being open to each person's kind of unique gifting and journey and call, and not just kind of seeing a leader and being like, let's just raise you up. Like, it has to be different for everyone, and everyone's journey is going to be unique.
Yeah, really good. Sorry, I just have one more. No, just keep on coming. I think just what I said around anxiety and perhaps not letting something be completely public so that I'm a bit more vulnerable. Something that we've kind of decided on together. Well, Ness actually let me still be in the room, but Ness has actually still let me come into different meetings and different settings where I can perhaps still have access to the experience of being part of those kind of places. But it's not necessarily on me to carry the weight of that publicly. So I feel really, really empowered, because she's actually still inviting my opinion and she's still inviting my perspective. And it's not done out of a place of secrecy. People have kind of seen, and it's, but it's just out of a place of, I think, protecting me. So I feel like, Ness, you've really got like my best interests at heart, because you're actually putting safeguards around me, but still giving me access and opportunity to hear and to learn. And I think another thing I would add is what I found really helpful is someone asking me, like, can I challenge you? Like, can I be the person who's actually going to call you out or ask you those difficult questions? So almost just allowing that. So if you're mentoring someone at the moment, do just ask them, like, can I actually really go there with you? Can I actually go to those places with you that feel quite difficult and a bit awkward or a bit uncomfortable? I found that to be really helpful as well.
Great. And so what are you guys doing now to raise up younger female leaders in your sphere?
Well, I'm obviously pregnant and we're having a girl, which is very exciting. So, that's going to be, I think, the biggest journey of raising up a little leader. She's now got it like, even more generations. That's exciting. But also, I think the two things that came to mind to me were like intentional one-to-one discipleship, but then also just like organically kind of inviting people into life. So there are 3 young girls in our church community who I mentor at the moment. One of them actually with my husband Jacob, because we really see kind of a call of leadership over her life. And she's very theologically hungry, and I couldn't answer some of the questions. So actually, but again, it's a beautiful example of actually where kind of, coming together really complement each other. So 3 young girls who I'm kind of see leadership over and intentionally investing in. And then also, just more organically, I think, being willing to invite people kind of into life with us and see, the highs and the lows. I'm really big on kind of living authentically and not giving off this kind of perfect image that we've got it all together and that leadership in life is kind of all good, but actually like it can be really hard, it can be really isolating, and it can be really costly. So I think being really real with kind of younger female leaders and just kind of inviting them to come and do life with us, whether that's like living with us for a bit or coming and having dinner with us or whatever. And then also at the Basement Youth Cafe, obviously. So my husband runs a youth cafe and we've been doing that for 2 years. And I'm the only kind of like young female leader on the team. So we've got a couple of older women, but often the young girls kind of come to me, and they are often unchurched, and they have we've had some really, really hard kind of situations over the last few years of people who have been in very, very poor kind of mental health, really, really struggling with all sorts of different things, and just showing up. I think consistency, just showing up, and there's been opportunities where we've been able to pray for them. A couple of them have now come back from uni and said they're going to church, which is amazing. So I think just kind of consistency of showing up. I guess it's all the stuff we've talked about. It's like, well, I do you know what I mean, have really experienced this, the pros and the cons of being a younger leader, and now I want to really be able to pass that on, do you know what I mean, to those younger leaders around me.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that as well. I think, to be honest, it's kind of part of the DNA of Open Heaven, really, the discipleship culture that is kind of multiplied and passed on. And so I think I've kind of been aware from when I was an intern, really, of like anything I'm learning, I need to be generous with, I need to share it. This isn't just for me. And so, well, being the student worker, naturally, I talk to a lot of students. So students are kind of the people that I disciple at the moment. Hey, Lily, you all right? Lily's one of our students here. But I think a big one for me, I love encouragement, and so that is actually a massive one for me. Of like, I just love speaking words of life over younger girls, and also just inviting them almost like into spaces like this, really, and trying to do my best to equip and to empower. I think I do my best discipling one-to-one, like similar to what Ella was saying, just like I really connect with someone on a deeper level in that way. But I think on a different side of things, I think it's so important that I'm engaging with people who don't yet know Jesus and discipling them as well, whether that be like my peers, like my friends from home, my friends from uni, but also like we had an Alpha course recently, and there were a couple of PhD students at my table, both girls, and we just connected really, really well, and ended up in actually I got to read the Bible with them a few weeks ago, and so almost passing that on to equip and to empower them was a really beautiful moment. But I think it's also really important that I disciple one-to-one just for a leadership sense. So I disciple your daughter Susan, which is lovely, and another girl called Kesh, but that is with a specific remit around leadership and actually what they can bring and empowering them in that way. I think that's what I would.
Brilliant. So good. Wow. Well, we've got 1 minute. Sorry. So if you have a question that you think will, like, everyone's going to benefit from.
I'm the mum of 2 daughters who I've been praying for since birth, and I see godly leadership over both of their lives. What would you say as a mum I can input most? Because they obviously don't necessarily want to talk to me as much as I would love them to. They don't want to bare their heart to me. If I get a little drag, that's, a big whoop, isn't it? So my role is really pray, which I do for them, and I pray that that other godly women will come around, so obviously yourselves, fantastic. I pray that they're in situations where they won't be discouraged as women, but will be built up by women around them, reaffirming that. But is there anything else I can do? Because, if I speak over them and say, really, God's got his hand upon you, they're like, here we go, that's your mum. No, it's not because I'm your mum, it's because I see that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, it's very real. So I think I would encourage you not to shy away from still speaking that over them, because I really resonate with that, and having shared a bit about the journey of kind of mum and me and our relationship, I look back on those times now and I'm so grateful that I had a mum who really, really believed in me and didn't shy away from speaking that over me. Maybe at the time I found that really irritating and frustrating, not always, but definitely sometimes. So I'd really encourage you not to, obviously there's wisdom in that, but not to shy away from, do you know what I mean, encouraging them and speaking that over them, because you're their mum, and that's really important that they hear that from you. And then also I think, encouraging them to connect with other women is key. So that's amazing that, do you know what I mean, they're being mentored. But yeah, I would encourage you not to, not to shy away from that, because I hope and pray there will be a time where actually they look back and they go, oh my gosh, like mum really believed in us, and that's amazing.
I think I would say ask them what they're learning, in their discipleship to Jesus, or what's standing out to you in Scripture at the moment. What is catching your attention? What's Jesus saying to you? Is there a place that the Holy Spirit's leading you? Almost inviting them to take the lead in the conversation, because I feel like in their answer they will kind of reveal where they're at with their leadership in a way. And
or they might just say, you're being a bit nosy.
Well, we choose to think the best.
Yeah, absolutely. That's wisdom, isn't it?
I'd just say be inquisitive. Some of the most fruitful chats I've had with my mum in recent years is just where she's kind of asked me, what's Jesus doing in you at the moment? And that I think the older I've become and the more maturity I guess I have in my faith, the more I can see that my mum is just actually really just trying to cheer me on. And if I tell her what I'm learning, she's then going to go away and be a prayer warrior about it and go and speak it over me and pray it over me. Be inquisitive, I guess, is what I'd say.
Yeah, and it's the long game, isn't it? And even if you don't get much back now, I think probably most people in this room would say, as kids get older and then you're beginning to operate more adult to adult, you will then be able to have some of the deeper conversations. It is lunchtime, but are people happy just to stay around for another few minutes? Yeah, Ruth?
So my question kind of leads on from this one specifically. So as a leader in the church, so I'm married, my husband is the senior leader. I hold the dual space like Ella does in the world and in the church. We need a coffee in the chat. And that's a tough place. And I have a 15-year-old daughter who very much has a call of leadership. She's an emerging worship leader. But obviously, Dad is the senior leader. Mum is very much an upfront leader. And there are certain things where we can't advocate for her in that space because it could be seen as nepotism. She's fairly forthright and vocal. For those who know me well would not be surprised. But what can we cultivate around her so that just like Ellie, you'll understand this from the other point. What can we cultivate around her as daughter of senior leaders to find her own gifting and people who can advocate for her in that space?
To me.
I thought your point of sometimes going away to different settings and contexts, and so you are you in your own right, and people speaking over you. There is something actually really important, about that, which obviously will happen, at some point in the next few years. But even if there's different kind of youth camps or
even at school, like we mentioned that, and I was going to say that with you as well. Actually, like encouraging them to take up opportunity that maybe isn't just inside of the church. I think is really good. But also I think I don't mean this to sound negative at all. It's just the journey I've been on, accepting the fact that some people will think it's nepotism. And I really, really struggle with that because my mum stepped down from the leadership team as I stepped up, and I was very aware of what that looked like. And actually, I went on my complete own separate journey to her. It had obviously had lots to do with her, me growing up, but in terms of God's call on my life. It was completely separate. But there, I think I had to go on a real journey of accepting that some people in the room were going to think that, and it wasn't my job to stand there and justify God's call on my life. But actually doing what you can to help that. So having people around her, it comes back to what we're talking about, you know, mentoring, discipling. Is there someone actually, or a few people, do you know what I mean, that see that call on her life as well and can encourage and build that up and call that out. So it's not just you guys. But also, again, not shying away from the fact that actually, like, you see that over her, and that's amazing. So it's a really tricky one. Happy to talk more about it because I've lived and breathed it.
I think there is something really exciting that's happening at the moment with the under 25. So I'm really expectant for, you know, teenagers to actually, there's going to be an acceleration in terms of what God is doing that. I can remember years ago, prophetic word, what would have taken 6 years will take 6 months, what would have taken 6 months will take 6 weeks. And so when we're seeing whether it's a young female worship leader or a young female evangelist, a bit like the story, you know, Summer, you know, the 7-year-old, like we're going to see more of that. So that's exciting, and we just need to anticipate what's going to be needed.